I am glad to have you again, and today's topic is very interesting, and the topic is the clash of two mentalities. So, right now, society is characterized by several generations, and each generation carries a mentality. And we were to rush quickly in history and look at the last 7 generations. We would start with the greatest generation, guys who are born in 1901. Then we'll have the silent generation, the guys who suffered World War I and World War II. And then we'll have the baby boomers. And then we'll have Gen X. So Gen X are children of the baby boomers. Then we'll have millennials, which is the generation which comes after Gen X. Then we have Gen Zs. And then we have Gen Alpha and also Gen Beta. Those the guys who are born 2020 onwards. So our society today is characterized by those generations. And the truth is, every generation is not only a generation, but it's a mentality. So every generation has a mentality with itself. And that mentality is what determines how that particular generation defines life, and also defines the principles which run life. Because it is the definition which you give something which determines the level of value you give that particular thing. For instance, you have 2 types of automobiles, an Alto Suzuki and a BMW. What will make you value the BMW more than the Alto Suzuki is your definition of both of them. And what determines the definition? Features in particular things. For example, in the case of Alto Suzuki, size of the engine and how the motor vehicle is literally built. BMW, of course, the engine and the rest of the accessories which were put in place when the motor vehicle was being assembled. Definition of a particular thing determines the level of value you give that particular thing. Therefore, the 8 or 7 generations which have been here on earth recently and which are currently here on earth, each of them have a particular mentality. And that mentality determines the definition they give to life and also all the aspects of life. That is the principles which support and run life. So we have Gen X and we have Gen Z. And those are the 2 generations with different mentalities which are clashing. And I want to congratulate anyone who is parenting a Gen Z. And the reason is because no one trained you to parent a Gen Z. And why is that very important? Or why do you deserve a congratulation message? This is the reason. Your mentality as a Gen X and the mentality of the Gen Z, they are years apart. And that means if you are a Gen X, your definition of life and the value which you give certain aspects of life is completely different from the definition of life of Gen Zs and the value they give to particular parameters of life or aspects of life. So, if you are the parent and here is the child, and both of you define life differently and value life differently, there is gonna be a clash. And now the funniest thing is this, or the most interesting thing is this: the Gen X and the Gen Z, both of them are interdependent. They need each other. The Gen X is the parent, the Gen Z is the child. Before we delve into that discussion, now, what creates a mentality? Let's start there. What creates a mentality? And this is the thing. Environment which a particular generation is exposed to. And of course, what characterizes that particular environment, because every environment has characteristics. Let's start with Gen X. What characterizes the environment or the surrounding of the Gen X? Gen X, these are guys when they were young, because the rooting or the roots of mentality of an individual are usually founded when the person is young. So when the Gen X were young, what characterized their time? The internet, which came forth in the early or mid or late 90s and early 2000s. So majority of guys who are born in the 75, who are born in the early 80s, this is what happened. The internet came forth when they were either in their 20s or probably slightly before they were in their 20s. That is what they will look at and say, previous generation, which is baby boomers, never enjoyed and we are enjoying, never interacted with and we are interacted with. They don't know how to use it, to apply it, and we are doing that. So that was the pride of Gen X, the internet, the Yahoo, innovations like the Gmail. So that is what they took pride in, the innovations which dawned. The period which Gen X were young, that is what contributed to the building of their mentality. And that is what they yearned for. Each one of them yearned to have an email. Each one of them yearned to have a phone, to master how they can interact with the internet. And that was super. And that's why they were called the .com generation. And that was amazing. And then they grew up with that. And the rest of the innovations came along. They never knew they were going to have children by the name Gen Zs. Okay, we've got millennials, but millennials, theirs is a little bit easy because millennials were born at a time whereby the advancement of technology had not gone robust. And the innovation was face by face. And again, their parenting or their generation is encompassed of slightly what characterized the raising up of Gen X and slightly or partly what characterized the raising of Gen Zs. So the millennials have partly the influence of what influenced Gen X and also partly what has been influencing the Gen Zs. That is why the millennials can listen before they make a judgment. So those are the millennials for you. But the Gen Zs, totally different era. The Gen X, totally different era. And the reason is because the Gen X, before innovations came, everything was almost analog. And that's why baby boomers, majority of their livelihood was characterized by analog processes. But with Gen X, digitization, signals and signs started coming in. And then that anticipation and that change, that there is literal migration from analog to digital, gave them pride, gave them confidence, assured them that something new had happened, and they were the driving force to bring into application what was taking place, especially after the internet came and the email came. So in terms of pride of life, which comes as a result of innovations and which comes as a result of that there are some innovations which have completely transformed livelihood of humanity, the Gen X had it. They had that pride, they had that excitement, and that affirmed them that they mattered most and they were the leaders in how things were supposed to be done and even in definition of life. On the other side, they have said millennials happen to partly have what characterized the Gen X and partly what is characterizing the Gen Zs. Those innovations which came forth when Gen X were around, they characterized their mentality, the building of their mentality. And that's why I've said they were excited and they had the pride of being the guys who are the driving force of implementation, adoption, application of the benefits which came with the internet, the email in the marketplace, and other few innovations which came along. And remember, I've said those innovations characterize the migration from analog to digital. That was the next for you. And these are guys who are born from, let's say, 1975 all the way to 1985. And the reason is because in their 20s, let's say from when they were 18 all the way to when they were 29, that is when the innovations which internet gave a platform to come forth, that is the time those innovations had to be adopted in every place, in the marketplace, in schools, in hospitals, and the guys who are doing that were the Gen X. Now, on the other hand, we have the Gen Zs. The Gen Zs are born at a time where these are guys born after 1995 upwards, and the top cream of Gen Zs is from 1998 all the way to around 2010. That is the cream of the Gen Zs. So now those guys are born at a time whereby we have the phone. It's not about digitization of processes. It's about artificial intelligence, total migration from analog to digital. And now there's a migration of digital to artificial intelligence. And also artificial general intelligence. And this is the place whereby machines are taking the place of humans in the workplace and in other key processes which define life. And therefore, Generation Z, they discover that, and they are born at a time whereby, for example, the Gen X, in order to play football and identify with their prime guys in football, like guys like Maradona, guys like Pele, they would, especially in Kenya, they would come together, they would get a ball, some papers, and then they would build something roundish, and then get some strings, and at the end of the day, they have a ball. Then they will put some post this side, post the other side, and they enjoy football. And that is how they would identify with those icons and those celebrities in the world of football. And that was Gen X. On the other side, Gen Zs, for them to identify with their icons in football or their celebrities in football, what do? They are born at a time of PlayStation. And they'll do is they will not even go at the shop and buy the real football ball. What they will do is they will get some amount, probably some 500 bob. They'll go to a PlayStation, and they will literally play the game, seeing or using or controlling their celebrities in the world of football on the screen. And that is why I have just said that Gen Z, their environment is characterized by a reality whereby there has been a total migration from analog to digital, and not only to digital, but from digital to artificial intelligence. And that's why at PlayStation, they can play all the games which Gen X had to play physically. They can play them virtually. So this is what is building the environment of the Generation Z. And this is what is and us built their mentality. One mentality which is Gen X was born during analog. They had the opportunity to oversee migration from analog to digital. And they played a key role in that, in every sector, economically, spiritually, socially, all that. On the other hand, there is Generation Z here, which has been born to artificial intelligence realities. These two mentalities are very different. During Gen X, for example, people like tellers in a bank, those guys were esteemed. And the truth is, yes, they were esteemed. You walk into a bank and the teller would assist you with withdraw your money. Now, in the era of Gen Zs, the teller is on their phone. They just need to find the particular app of the bank which they have an account and withdraw the money to M-Pesa and pay, for example, their meal at the hotel via till. No cash. They don't need to walk into the bank. And that's why the definition of life of Generation Z and the definition of life of Gen X can never be the same. What Gen Z values, Gen X doesn't value. What Gen X valued, Gen Z cannot value. And that's why in terms of time management, Gen Zs, they are very poor at that. Why? Artificial intelligence reality. If it's, for example, if it's food, a scroll and a click, they order through Glovo and they have their meal. On the other hand, for the Generation X, they had to probably go buy some charcoal, struggle lighting the fire, and prepare the meal. That will take like 2-3 hours. Therefore, time management for Gen X was very key. And that's why even today, Gen Xs, they are very good at time management. Gen Zs, these are the guys who will sleep until 2 p.m. Why? When they look at their schedule, AI and automation of systems have made everything possible. In fact, it has made things like walking and traveling long distances unnecessary. They don't need to walk to the stage to get a mat or a transport means. They just go into their phone, they call a cab. The cab comes at the gate or at the doorstep, and then they go run their errands, and the same way they go home. So that is the environment characterizing the Gen Zs. On the other hand, as I have said, there is the environment which characterizes Gen X. You have to walk to the stage. You have to just prepare yourself because the environment surrounding you is not that friendly. You're the one to make the environment friendly. On the other hand, Gen Zs, the environment surrounding them is very friendly. they are the one making that environment unfriendly.